So on our previous video for Much Ado About Nothing, we went all the way from Act 1 Scene 2 to Act 2 Scene 1 to the end of that, and we saw the prince win hero for Claudio and Leonato being happy about that. We saw Beatrice and Benedick fighting as usual, and we also heard that Don Pedro, along with some of the others, were planning on tricking Beatrice and Benedick into falling in love with each other. So that's where we left them. And so we will continue with Act 2, Scene 2, which is in Leonato's house, in a room in Leonato's house, and we see Don John and Borachio together. So Don John is speaking, and he says, "It is so, the Count Claudio shall marry the daughter of Leonato." And Borachio replies, "Yea, my lord, but I can cross it." Don John says, "Any bar, any cross, any impediment will be medicinable to me. I am sick in displeasure to him, and whatsoever comes athwart his affection ranges evenly with mine. How canst thou cross this marriage?" I've said previously that Don John as a villain doesn't have a master plan. He is simply trying to cause trouble. And this, I think, is confirming that again. He's saying any bar, any cross, any impediment is all he's after. And Borachio says, "Not honestly, my lord, but so covertly that no dishonesty shall appear in me." And Don John says, "Show me briefly how." Borachio says, "I think I told your lordship a year since how much I am in the favour of Margaret, the waiting gentlewoman to Hero." And Don John says, "I remember." Borachio says, "I can, at any unseasonable instant of the night, appoint her to look out at her lady's chamber window." Sounds simple enough. And Don John says, "What life is in that to be the death of this marriage?" And Borachio continues with his plan, saying, "The poison of that lies in you to temper. Go you to the prince your brother, spare not to tell him that he hath wronged his honour in marrying the renowned Claudio, whose estimation do you mightily hold up, to a contaminated stale, such a one as Hero." And Don John says, "What proof shall I make of that?" And Borachio says, "Proof enough to misuse the prince, to vex Claudio, to undo Hero, and to kill Leonato. Look you for any other issue?" And Don John says, "Only to despite them I will endeavour anything." And so the idea that Don John just wants to cause trouble, Borachio is fulfilling all of that for all of the people that he wants to disrupt. And then Borachio goes on to explain his plan more, saying, "Go then, find me a meet hour to draw Don Pedro and the Count Claudio alone. Tell them that you know that Hero loves me. Intend a kind of zeal both to the prince and Claudio, as, in love of your brother's honour, who hath made this match, and his friend's reputation, who is thus like to be cozened with the semblance of a maid, that you have discovered thus. They will scarcely believe this without trial. Offer them instances, which shall bear no less likelihood than to see me at her chamber window, hear me call Margaret Hero, and hear Margaret term me Claudio, and bring them to see this the very night before the intended wedding. For in the meantime I will so fashion the matter that Hero shall be absent, and there shall appear such seeming truth of Hero's disloyalty that jealousy shall be called assurance, and all the preparation overthrown." And before we go on from this, I really struggle with this bit here. It says, "Hear me call Margaret Hero, hear Margaret term me Claudio." In what world would Margaret go along with that without knowing the plan or without being on their side? I mean, we are told later that Margaret knew nothing, that Margaret is innocent, and mostly when we see Margaret, she is a friend both to Beatrice, to Hero, and also later to Benedick as well, and yet we're expecting her to quite willingly call Borachio Claudio and allow Borachio to call her Hero. So I find that very confusing, but we'll go with it. So Don John then says to this, "Grow this to what adverse issue it can. I will put it in practice. Be cunning in the working this, and thy fee is 1,000 ducats. And Borachio says, be you constant in the accusation, and my cunning shall not shame me. And Don John says, I will presently go learn their day of marriage. And they leave. So that is the end of Act 2, Scene 2. It's a short one. We're seeing the villains and their deceptive plan, again, where we are trying to hide identities. So on to Act 2, Scene 3, which takes place in Leonato's garden and begins Don Pedro's master plan of tricking Benedick into loving Beatrice. So starting with Benedick alone there. Benedick says, boy, and then a boy enters. And the boy says, Signor. Benedick says, in my chamber window lies a book. Bring it hither to me in the orchard. The boy says, I am here already, sir. And Benedick says, I know that, but I would have thee hence and here again. At which point the boy exits. And we hear Benedick talk to us here. I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behaviour to love, will, after he hath laughed at such shallow follies in others, become the argument of his own scorn by falling in love. And such a man is Claudio. We will see that this speech can also be applied to Benedick later on. I have known when there was no music with him but the drum and the fife, and now had he rather hear the tabor and the pipe. I have known when he would have walked 10 mile afoot to see a good armour, and now will he lie 10 nights awake carving the fashion of a new doublet. He was wont to speak plain and to the purpose like an honest man and a soldier, and now is he turned orthography. His words are a very fantastical banquet, just so many strange dishes. May I be so converted and see with these eyes? I cannot tell. I think not. I will not be sworn, but love may transform me to an oyster. But I'll take my oath on it. Till he have made an oyster of me, he shall never make such a fool. Till he have made an oyster of me, he shall never make me such a fool. One woman is fair, yet I am well. Another is wise, yet I am well. Another virtuous, yet I am well. But till all graces be in one woman shall not come in my grace. He carries on still. Rich she shall be, that's certain. Wise, or I'll none. Virtuous, or I'll never cheapen her. Fair, or I'll never look on her. Mild, or come not near me. Noble, or not I for an angel. Of good discourse, an excellent musician. And her hair shall be of what colour it please God. Ha! The prince and miss your love, I will hide me in the arbour. And then he hides. So throughout this speech, this is a speech of 2 parts. The first half is him being disgruntled by Claudio's intended marriage. The way Claudio has changed. They appeared to be similar previously. They were good friends, both soldiers, both working together, both with the same interests. Going to see armours, liking the same music. And now he's saying Claudio has changed, or he's expecting Claudio to change into this idea of a married man that he has in his head. And he doesn't think it likely that it will happen to him also. And then the second part, despite what he's just said, is him then suggesting what this woman would be that would change him. But the list he gives is ridiculous. It is an unattainable list, all good things in one woman. To the point that he throws in such things as an excellent musician. Not your average qualification for seeking a wife, but he adds that onto the list anyway, because he's creating this fantastical idea. And then he sees the others and he hides. At this point, Don Pedro, Leonato and Claudio, all who are in on the plan, enter the space. And Balthazar, with musicians, is also there. So Don Pedro speaks. Come, shall we hear this music? And Claudio says, yea, my lord, how still the evening is, as hushed on purpose to grace harmony. And Don Pedro says, see you where Benedick hath hid himself? And Claudio says he does. Oh, very well, my lord. The music ended. We'll fit the kid fox with a pennyworth. And Don Pedro says, come, Balthazar, we'll hear that song again. Balthazar says, oh good, my lord, tax not so bad a voice to slander music any more than once. Don Pedro speaks. It is the witness still of excellency to put a strange face on his own perfection. I pray thee sing, let me woo no more. And Balthazar says, because you talk of wooing, I will sing. Since many a wooer doth commence his suit, to her he thinks not worthy, yet he woos, yet will he swear he loves. And I think Balthazar here is aware that they are being incredibly stereotypical about what romance should be. Since many a wooer doth commence his suit to her. So he's saying it's fairly standard procedure. And they're all flowing along the well-worn tracks of a romance play at this point. And Don Pedro says, nay, pray thee come, or if thou wilt hold longer argument, do it in notes. And Balthazar says, note this before my notes. There's not a note of mine that's worth the noting. And Don Pedro says, why, these are very crotches that he speaks. Notes, notes forsooth, and nothing. A little while back, I was informed that back when this was originally written, the word nothing and the word noting actually sounded very similar. So this play with the words notes and noting and nothing are all tied together. Much ado about nothing, much ado about noting. Did you note her? I looked upon her, but I noted her not. So whenever you're hearing the word notes, that is a play with that word. Anyway, it's just a side point. And Benedick then, from his hiding place, says, now, divine air, now is his soul ravished. Is it not strange that sheep's guts should hale souls out of men's bodies? Well, a horn for my money when all's done. And Balthazar sings. And the lyrics are as thus. Sigh no more, ladies, sigh no more. Men were deceivers ever. Very apt. We've talked about how much deception there is. 1 foot in sea and 1 on shore, to one thing constant never. We've said Claudio seems quite fickle at this point. Then sigh not so, but let them go, and be you blithe and bonny, converting all your sounds of woe into hey nonny nonny. Sing no more ditties, sing no more of dumps so dull and heavy. The fraud of men was ever so, since summer first was levy. Talking again, this fraud, this idea of deceiving somebody. Then sigh not so, but let them go, and be you blithe and bonny, converting all your sounds of woe into hey nonny nonny. Now Don Pedro requested a love song, a song for wooing, and this song is not a song for wooing, and yet that's what they've sang, and they don't pick up on this. Don Pedro says, by my troth, a good song, and Balthazar says, and an ill singer, my lord, and Don Pedro says, ha, no, no, faith, thou singest well enough for a shift. Benedick says, and he had been a dog, they should have howled thus, they would have hanged him, and I pray God his bad voice bode no mischief. I had his life, have heard the night raven, come what plague could have come after it. And Don Pedro says, yea, marry, dost thou hear, Balthazar? I pray thee get us some excellent music, for tomorrow night we would have it at the Lady Hero's chamber window. And Balthazar says, the best I can, my lord. Don Pedro then says, do so, and farewell. And then Balthazar and the musicians leave, leaving us with Leonato, Don Pedro, and Claudio. So Don Pedro continues at this point. Come hither, Leonato. What was it you told me of today, that your niece Beatrice was in love with Signor Benedick? So here they are starting to plant their seeds in Benedick's mind that Beatrice loves him. And Claudio says, oh, aye. And whispering then to Don Pedro, so Benedick doesn't hear this part, says, stalk on, the fowl sit. And then he continues, I did never think that lady would have loved any man. And Leonato says, no, nor I neither, but most wonderful that she should so dote on Signor Benedick, whom she hath in all outward behaviours seemed ever to abhor. Benedick, still hiding, says, "It's possible, sits the wind in that corner." And Leonato says, "By my troth, my lord, I cannot tell what to think of it, but that she loves him with an enraged affection. It is past the infinite of thought." Don Pedro says, "Maybe she doth but counterfeit." And Claudio says, "Faith, like enough." And Leonato, "Oh God, counterfeit. There was never counterfeit of passion come so near the life of passion as she discovers it." And Don Pedro says, "Why? What effects of passion shows she?" And Claudio, again without Benedick hearing this part, says, "Bait the hook well, this fish will bite." And Leonato says, "What effects, my lord? She will sit you?" To Claudio, he then says, "You heard my daughter tell you how." And Claudio says, "She did indeed." And Don Pedro says, "How? How, I pray you? You amaze me. I would have thought her spirit had been invincible against all assault of affection." And Leonato says, "I would have sworn it had, my lord, especially against Benedick." And Benedick then comments to himself, "I should think this a gull, but that the white-bearded fellow speaks it. Knavery cannot, sure, hide itself in such reverence." And then Claudio, without Benedick hearing, says, "He hath taken the infection. Hold it up." Don Pedro says, "Has she made her affection known to Benedick?" And Leonato, "No, and swears she never will. That's her torment." Claudio says, "'Tis true, indeed, so your daughter says. Shall I," says she, "that have so oft encountered him with scorn, write to him that I love him?" And Leonato continues, "This says she now when she is beginning to write to him, for she'll be up 20 times a night, and there will she sit in her smock till she have writ a sheet of paper. My daughter tells us all." They're using Hero here as their source of information in this fictitious discussion. And Claudio says, "Now you talk of a sheet of paper, I remember a pretty jest your daughter told us of." And Leonato says, "Oh, and when she had writ it and was reading it over, she found Benedick and Beatrice between the sheets." Claudio says that. And Leonato, "Oh, she tore the letter into 1,000 halfpence, railed at herself that she should be so immodest to write to one that she knew would flout her. I measure him," says she, "by my own spirit, for I should flout him if he writ to me. Yea, though I love him, I should." I mentioned previously that most of Beatrice's mocking and insults towards Benedick, she usually claims are a defensive, a reactive, and mimicking what she expects Benedick to do to her. And Leonato here seems to recognize that also. And Claudio then says, "Then down upon her knees she falls, weeps, sobs, beats her heart, tears her hair, prays, curses. Oh, sweet Benedick, God give me patience." Leonato confirms, she says, "She doth indeed. My daughter says so, and the ecstasy hath so much overborne her that my daughter is sometimes afeard she will do a desperate outrage to herself. It is very true." And Don Pedro says, "It were good that Benedick knew of it by some other if she will not discover it." And Claudio says, "To what end? He would but make a sport of it, and torment the poor lady worse." Don Pedro says, "And he should. It were an arms to hang him. She's an excellent sweet lady, and out of all suspicion she is virtuous." Claudio says, "And she is exceedingly wise." Don Pedro says, "In everything but loving Benedick." And Leonato, "Oh, my lord, wisdom and blood combating in so tender a body, we have 10 proofs to 1 that blood hath the victory. I am sorry for her, as I have just cause, being her uncle and her guardian." Don Pedro says, "I would she had bestowed this dotage on me. I would have doffed all other respects and made her half myself. I pray you, tell Benedick of it, and hear what he will say." Before we continue with their speeches, if we see the list here of how they describe Beatrice, Claudio says she is extremely wise, and for that, Don Pedro says that she is virtuous. They started this list that Benedick himself made not long ago. And now Don Pedro is suggesting that they tell Benedick of this. And Leonato says, "Were it good, think you?" And Claudio says, "Hero thinks surely she will die, for she says she will die if he love her not, and she will die ere she makes her love known, and she will die if he woo her, rather than will bate one breath of her accustomed crossness." And they can see that Beatrice's stance is much like Benedick. She's made this character for herself that she will stay with. Her accustomed crossness, her habit, her routine, the persona she's made for herself. She has no desire to leave it. Don Pedro says, "She doth well. If she should make tender of her love, 'tis very possible he'll scorn it, for the man, as you know all, hath a contemptible spirit." Claudio says, "He is a very proper man." Don Pedro says, "He hath indeed a good outward happiness." And Claudio, "For God, and in my mind, very wise." Don Pedro, "He doth indeed show some sparks that are like wit." And Claudio, "I take him to be valiant." Don Pedro says, "As Hector, I assure you, and in the managing of quarrels you may say he is wise, for either he avoids them with great discretion, or undertakes them with a most Christian-like fear." Which seems an odd thing to say, considering they're talking about Beatrice, and they've seen the way Beatrice and Benedick quarrel with each other. But perhaps that's the exception. Leonato says, "If he do fear God, and must necessarily keep peace, if he break the peace, he ought to enter into a quarrel with fear and trembling." And Don Pedro says, "And so will he do, for the man doth fear God, howsoever it seems not in him by some large jests he will make. Well, I am sorry for your niece. Shall we go seek Benedick, and tell him of her love?" Claudio says, "Never tell him, my lord, let her wear it out with good counsel." And Leonato says, "Nay, that's impossible, she may wear her heart out first." And Don Pedro says, "Well, we will hear further of it by your daughter. Let it cool the while. I love Benedick well, and I could wish he would modestly examine himself to see how much he is unworthy so good a lady." Leonato then says, "My lord, will you walk? Dinner is ready." And Claudio, so Benedick can't hear him, says, "If he do not dote upon her upon this, I will never trust my expectation." Don Pedro also, so Benedick can't hear, says, "Let there be the same net spread for her. That must your daughter and her gentlewoman carry. The sport will be when they hold one an opinion of another's dotage and no such matter. That's the scene that I would see, which will be merely a dumb show. Let us send her to call him in to dinner." And then the three of them leave. And so this last passage by Don Pedro says, "That will be the sport, when they hold one an opinion of another's dotage." So for him, it really is a game. It's a sport. He's having fun, which seems a little bit cruel. And he also says, "One an opinion of another's dotage and no such matter." And we've seen previously that clearly there was always something between Benedick and Beatrice, something in the past. And so his assumption that there is no such matter perhaps is false in the first place. So now those three have left, and Benedick, coming out of his hiding place, then speaks. And then he says, "This can be no trick." Although we as the audience know that it is a trick. He says, "The conference was sadly born. They have the truth of this from Hero." So they've merely said that it was Hero. There's no evidence that it was from Hero. And yet Benedick trusts both Leonato and Don Pedro as leadership figures, respectable men, and Claudio as his friend. He doesn't think they would be lying. They seem to pity the lady. It seems her affections have their full bent. Love me! Why, it must be requited. I hear how I am censured. They say I will bear myself proudly, if I perceive the love come from her. They say too that she will rather die than give any sign of affection. I did not think to marry. I must not seem proud. Happy are they that hear their detractions and can put them to mending." So he's recognized that what they've said about him might actually be true, that perhaps the way he has been behaving isn't a good thing and that he should change. And now he goes on to talk about Beatrice. And he says, "They say the lady is fair. 'Tis a truth. I can bear them witness. And virtuous. 'Tis so, I cannot reprove it. And wise, but for loving me. By my troth, it is no addition to her wit, nor no great argument of her folly. For I will be horribly in love with her." And those qualities he's just listed, fair, virtuous, wise, They were in that list he was making earlier on. And he's decided he's going to love her. I may chance have some odd quirks and remnants of wit broken on me, because I have railed so long against marriage. But doth not the appetite alter? He's already coming up with excuses here for his sudden change in stance on marriage. And he says, a man loves the meat in his youth that he cannot endure in his age. Shall quips and sentences and these paper bullets of the brain awe a man from the career of his humour? No, the world must be peopled. When I said I would die a bachelor, I did not think I would live till I were married. And it sounds a bit of a joke, but in fairness, they were just at war. So perhaps he really did see himself in this military lifestyle and dying in such a way. Although more likely, again, just trying to find an out for his really hard stance on never marrying. And then here comes Beatrice. By this day, she's a fair lady. I do spy some marks of love in her. And now Beatrice arrives, having no idea that any of this has just taken place. And Beatrice says, against my will, I am sent to bid you come in to dinner. And Benedick says, fair Beatrice, I thank you for your pains. First civil sentence we've heard Benedick say to Beatrice. Beatrice says, I took no more pains for those thanks than you take pains to thank me. If it had been painful, I would not have come. And in terms of Beatrice, that's quite a mild response. And Benedick says, you take pleasure then in the message. Again, still very civil. And Beatrice says, yea, just so much as you may take upon a knife's point and choke a door withal. You have no stomachs in your fare you well. Beatrice here seems confused by Benedick's manner, which is understandable. And then she leaves at that point, and Benedick says, ha, against my will I am sent to bid you come in to dinner. There's a double meaning in that. I can see no double meaning. I don't think we're intended to. It is purely Benedick now seeing what he wants to see. I took no more pains for those thanks than you took pains to thank me. That's as much as to say, any pains that I take for you is as easy as thanks. Again, he's very much grasping at straws. He's now convinced Beatrice loves him, and he's seeing it everywhere, regardless of the fact that we're intended to think that Beatrice doesn't love him at this stage. If I do not take pity on her, I am a villain. If I do not love her, I am a Jew. I will get her picture. And then he leaves. So Benedick has been convinced quite easily, firstly by overhearing, and then whatever he sees in Beatrice from that point on, he is attributing to the fact that she loves him and doesn't want him to know. So that marks the end of Act 2, Scene 3. The men, Don Pedro, Claudio and Leonato, have set their trap for Benedick, and he fell straight into it very easily due to the fact he trusts these men, and also that apparently he previously did have some sort of a relationship with Beatrice, so he finds the idea believable if unlikely. And he's more than willing to play his part in loving Beatrice in return. Now we continue Much Ado About Nothing with Act 3 and Scene 1, which takes place in Leonato's garden. And here we have Hero, Margaret and Ursula, and they are about to set their trap for Beatrice in a similar way to the one that was played on Benedick in the previous scene. So we start with Hero. And she says, Good Margaret, run thee to the parlour. There shalt thou find my cousin Beatrice, proposing with the prince and Claudio. Whisper her ear and tell her I and Ursula walk in the orchard, and our whole discourse is all of her. Say that thou overheardst us, and bid her steal into the pleached bower, where honeysuckles ripened by the sun forbid the sun to enter, like favourites, made proud by princes, that advance their pride against the power that bred it. There will she hide her, to listen apropos. This is thy office, bear thee well in it, and leave us alone. And Margaret says, I'll make her come, I warrant you presently, at which point she exits. And now Hero says, Now Ursula, when Beatrice doth come, as we do trace this alley up and down, our talk must only be of Benedick. When I do name him, let it be thy part to praise him more than ever man did merit. My talk to thee must be how Benedick is sick in love with Beatrice. Of this matter is little Cupid's crafty arrow made, that only wounds by hearsay. At this point Beatrice arrives and hides. Now begin, says Hero. For look where Beatrice like a lapwing runs close by the ground to hear our conference. Ursula says, The pleasantest angling is to see the fish cut with her golden oars the silver stream, and greedily devour the treacherous bait. So angle we for Beatrice, who even now is couched in the woodbine coverture. Fear you not my part of the dialogue. Hero says, Then go we near her, that her ear lose nothing of the false sweet bait that we lay for it. And they move closer to Beatrice so Beatrice can hear her. And Hero continues saying, No, truly, Ursula, she is too disdainful. I know her spirits are as coy and wild as haggards of the rock. And Ursula says, But are you sure that Benedick loves Beatrice so entirely? Hero says, So says the prince and my betrothed lord. And Ursula says, And did they bid you tell her of it, madam? Hero said, They did entreat me to acquaint her of it, but I persuaded them, if they loved Benedick, to wish him wrestle with his affection, and never let Beatrice know of it. And Ursula says, Why did you so? Doth not the gentleman deserve as full a fortunate a bed as ever Beatrice shall couch upon? And Hero says, O God of love, I know he doth deserve as much as may be yielded to a man. But nature never framed a woman's heart of prouder stuff than that of Beatrice. Disdain and scorn ride sparkling in her eyes, misprizing what they look on, and her wit values itself so highly that to her all matter else seems weak. She cannot love, nor take no shape nor project of affection, she is so self-endeared. And Ursula says, Sure, I think so, and therefore certainly it were not good she knew his love, lest she make sport of it. And Hero says, Why you speak truth, I never yet saw a man, how wise, how noble, young, how rarely featured, but she would spell him backward. If fair-faced, she would swear the gentleman should be her sister. If black, why nature drawing of an antic made a foul blot. If tall, a lance ill-headed. If low, an agate very vilely cut. If speaking, why a vein blown with all winds. If silent, why a block moved with none. So turns she every man the wrong side out, and never gives to truth and virtue that which simpleness and merit purchaseth. And Ursula says, Sure, such carping is not commendable. And Hero says, No, not to be so odd and from all fashions as Beatrice is, cannot be commendable. But who dare tell her so? If I should speak, she would mock me into air. Oh, she would laugh me out of myself, press me to death with wit. Therefore let Benedick, like covered fire, consume away in sighs, waste inwardly. It were a better death than die with mocks, which is as bad as die with tickling. And Ursula says, Yet tell her of it, hear what she will say. And Hero says, No, rather I will go to Benedick, and counsel him to fight against his passion. And truly I'll devise some honest slanders to stain my cousin with. One doth not know how much an ill word may empoison liking. And here is where I realise I don't really like Hero. I mean, she's promising to lie about her cousin and devise some honest slanders to stain her with, which seems a bit mean, really. This is her cousin who she professes to love and to care for and want the best for, and now she's talking about lying about her to other people. But also she says, One doth not know how much an ill word may empoison liking, which is the complete opposite of what they're trying to do here. They're trying to say kind words to cause liking. So it's just a mirror image going on there. And Ursula continues and says, Oh, do not do your cousin such a wrong, which I agree with. She cannot be so much without true judgment, having so swift and excellent a wit as she is prized to have, as to refuse so rare a gentleman as Signor Benedick. And Hero says, He is the only man of Italy, always excepted my dear Claudio. And this I would like to say makes me think that she's, I mean, what does she really know of Claudio? She's not really shown much interest in him in particular. And now she's saying Benedick is the only man of Italy, and then tacking on the end, always accepted my dear Claudio, as if she just remembered she's meant to be marrying him. And Ursula says, I pray you be not angry with me, madam, speaking my fancy. Signor Benedick, for shape, forbearing, argument, and valour goes foremost in report through Italy. Hero says, indeed, he hath an excellent good name. And Ursula says, his excellence did earn it, ere he had it. When are you married, madam? So they finished their chat about Benedick now, and they are segueing to a new topic. Hero says, why, every day tomorrow. Come, go in, I'll show thee some attires, and have thee counsel which is the best to furnish me tomorrow. Ursula says, she's limed, I warrant you, we have caught her, madam. And Hero says, if it prove so, then loving goes by haps. Some cupids kill with arrows, some with traps. At which point Hero and Ursula leave, leaving us with Beatrice's thoughts on what she's just heard. So Beatrice says, what fire is in mine ears? Can this be true? Stand I condemned for pride and scorn so much? So that's the first thing she's taken from this, is that people think she's prideful and scornful. And she, like Benedick, sees that she should change and says, contempt farewell, and maiden pride adieu. No glory lives behind the back of such. And Benedick, love on, I will requite thee, taming my wild heart to thy loving hand. If thou dost love, my kindness shall incite thee to bind our loves up in a holy band, for others say thou dost deserve, and I believe it better than reportingly. Again, she's very easily convinced to love Benedick, and as we know, there was something there previously, but the last phrase she says, for others say thou dost deserve, and I believe it better than reportingly. She believes Benedick is deserving, even more so than the others were talking about, and they were talking as highly as they could have of him. And so that ends Act 3, Scene 1, and we will stop there because we start moving off onto a different tangent from Scene 2 onwards. So by this point, Benedick believes Beatrice loves him, Beatrice believes Benedick loves her. And the reason they've come to these conclusions is from hearing their friends say so.